In World War II, countless stories were etched into history books. But some of the most daring American missions were buried so deep under secrecy that even the men who carried them out were forbidden to speak. These were the missions that shaped battles from the shadows, blowing up Nazi rail lines, infiltrating enemy cities under false identities, guiding resistance fighters, and surviving deep inside Japanese-held jungles with no backup and no guarantee of extraction. These Americans were ghosts in a war of giants, their files stamped top secret, their accomplishments erased, mislabeled, or locked away for nearly 80 years. But why were they forgotten? And who decided their bravery didn't belong on the pages of history? Tonight, through declassified documents, lost diaries, and rare eyewitness accounts, we uncover these covert operations from secret Ost teams dropped into Nazi Germany, to American commandos roaming the Pacific Islands, alone, to missions so dangerous that Allied commanders believed no one would return. This is the hidden war behind enemy lines the war history tried to forget. But the world deserves to finally hear. As World War II exploded across continents and enemy forces advanced with terrifying speed, President Franklin D. Roosevelt realized that America was fighting blind a nation powerful in industry, but nearly helpless in espionage. To close this deadly gap, he created the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, the United States' first true spy agency, a secret organization built from scratch to infiltrate enemy lines, sabotage Axis operations, and gather intelligence no ordinary soldier could reach, led by the brilliant yet unpredictable William Wild Bill Donovan. The OSS recruited an unlikely army of misfits, linguists, actors, professors, athletes, escape artists, and refugees who had fled the very regimes they were now trained to destroy. They learned the arts of silent killing, lock-picking, disguise, sabotage, coded messaging, and surviving behind enemy borders with no support. Their training camps were filled with explosive experiments, mock Gestapo interrogations, and night drops where one wrong move meant death. This agency was not just a military innovation, it was America's transformation into a global intelligence power. And from these secret barracks would emerge the men and women who carried out some of the most dangerous missions of the entire war. Missions that even today feel more like spy thriller fiction than historical fact. When World War II erupted and fascist armies tore across Europe with ruthless efficiency, the United States suddenly faced a terrifying truth. Despite its industrial strength and military potential, it was effectively blind on the world stage, operating without a centralized intelligence network. While the Axis powers relied on sophisticated spy systems, codebreakers, and political infiltrators. Realizing this fatal weakness, President Franklin D. Roosevelt authorized the creation of an entirely new kind of organization, the Office of Strategic Services, or SS, America's first full-scale spy agency and the predecessor of the modern CIA. At the center of this transformation stood William Wild Bill Donovan, a decorated World War I hero whose bold vision and unorthodox methods made him both admired and feared within Washington. Donovan recruited not traditional soldiers, but an eclectic army of outsiders, professors, who spoke forgotten dialects, actors skilled in deception, refugees who had escaped Nazi terror, athletes with the stamina to survive deep behind enemy borders, magicians who could pick locks, mobsters familiar with the criminal underworld, and even Ivy League scholars capable of cracking enemy codes. These men and women were sent to secret training grounds where their lives were reshaped. They learned how to kill silently with piano wire, how to blow up bridges using plastic explosives disguised as lumps of coal, how to forge enemy documents, how to withstand interrogation, how to parachute into hostile territory at night, and how to disappear into a foreign city with nothing but a cover identity. OSS instructors staged brutal psychological tests, fake kidnappings, and simulated Gestapo interrogations to prepare agents for the unimaginable. Many trainees broke under the pressure, others emerged sharper, colder, and ready to operate in pure darkness inside these camps. America wasn't just preparing spies, it was learning how to wage a shadow war. A war fought in silence, in disguise, and in the night. And from this extraordinary crucible came the operatives who would soon parachute into occupied France, infiltrate Nazi command posts, sabotage Japanese supply routes, and conduct some of the most dangerous missions World War II had ever seen, missions so secret that even their families never knew the truth. Asterisk Operation Ripley began as a desperate, razor-thin gamble, with the German war machine moving men, tanks, and ammunition across Europe at terrifying speed. Allied commanders knew that destroying key rail lines deep inside occupied France could cripple entire divisions, but no official Allied unit could get close enough to do it. The task fell to the OSS, and a small American-led team was selected. Men trained to vanish into enemy territory like smoke, under moonless skies. These operatives parachuted into the French country, landing miles off target in fields crawling with German patrols. Their radios failed upon landing, common for early OSS operations, leaving them entirely isolated, with no backup, no extraction plan, and no way to signal for help. Yet their mission remained unchanged: infiltrate a network of heavily guarded rail routes feeding German forces in Normandy, and destroy them so efficiently that the enemy would not repair them for days, moving only at night. The team linked up with French resistance fighters hiding in remote farmhouses and abandoned barns, exchanging coded phrases to confirm identities, because a single mistake meant execution. German checkpoints, roving patrols, and civilian informants made every step lethal, forcing the operatives to disguise themselves as local laborers, farmers, even vagrants, just to pass through villages without being arrested. Working with handmade maps and stolen timetables, they identified choke points, narrow tunnels, elevated bridges, and single-track routes that, if destroyed, would force entire German columns to reroute or halt for days. The sabotage itself became a symphony of precision. Explosives disguised as lumps of coal slipped into train cars, delayed fuses set to detonate only after the team was miles away, and charges placed under bridges at night while German sentries smoked cigarettes just a few meters above them. When the bombs finally ignited, flames erupted across the French countryside, derailing trains, collapsing bridges and rupturing supply lines at the exact moment Allied forces needed it most. But the cost was enormous. Several resistance contacts disappeared, believed captured or killed, and one OSS operative narrowly escaped a German search party by hiding in a cold river for hours, breathing through a hollow reed. By the time Allied troops advanced through France, the rail system behind German lines was in chaos, its arteries severed by a mission that officially did not exist. Operation Ripley never made headlines, and for decades, number records acknowledged the Americans involved. But its success carved open a critical path toward the liberation of France and proved the OSS was capable of reshaping the war from behind enemy lines. Asterisk. The Jedburgh teams were unlike anything the modern US military had ever attempted. Three-man units, made up of one American, one British officer, and one French operative, trained to be dropped into Nazi-occupied Europe days or even hours before major Allied offensives. Their mission: unify and command scattered resistance groups, sabotage German reinforcements, and ignite chaos behind enemy lines the moment the Allies invaded. These teams trained relentlessly in Scotland, leaping from aircraft at night, learning to operate enemy weapons, mastering coded communication, and practicing demolition techniques that could derail a train or knock out a power station using only a few pounds of plastic explosive. Each team carried a suitcase radio nicknamed the Joan Eleanor, their only link to Allied command. And if captured, that radio alone could condemn entire villages. When D-Day approached, the Jedburghs were flown in under the rumble of bomber formations, their parachutes opening over forests, farms, and enemy-patrolled hills, often landing far from their intended drop zones. They emerged from the shadows to find resistance fighters who had been operating alone for years, scattered and underarmed, and transformed them into coordinated fighting units capable of crippling German supply routes. They taught sabotage under lantern light, organized ambushes, cut telephone lines, and launched night attacks against German convoys. The Jedburghs carried no heavy weapons and wore no formal uniforms beyond a small patch. If they were caught, they would be treated as spies and executed. Yet their operations held back entire German divisions during some of the war's most critical weeks. One team blew a railway trestle just hours before German armor attempted to cross it. Another ambushed convoys for 7 consecutive nights, forcing a panzer regiment to alter its route and delaying its rival at Normandy. Their work was so effective that German commanders began calling these unseen attackers the ghosts in the fields, and despite their enormous impact, the Jedburghs remained almost invisible in post-war history because their missions were overshadowed by the larger battles they quietly shaped. These small teams of American-led commandos didn't just assist the French resistance. They turned local fighters into a coordinated guerrilla army that helped crack open the Nazi grip on Western Europe. As winter descended on Europe in December 1944, the Ardennes forest became the stage for one of the war's most desperate and chaotic battles, the Battle of the Bulge. Amid the snow, ice, and freezing winds, American intelligence officers were tasked with an almost suicidal mission: penetrate deep into German-held villages to locate enemy panzer movements and relay critical information to Allied command before entire towns were obliterated. These operatives moved alone or in pairs, often disguised as German soldiers or civilians, carrying nothing heavier than a small firearm, maps, and their wits. The forest was a maze of snow-covered roads, frozen rivers, and German checkpoints, where a single misstep meant immediate execution. The mission required them to interact with terrified villagers, some of whom had family conscripted into German units, and they had to extract vital intelligence without revealing their identity. One agent recounted crawling for hours through snowdrifts to eavesdrop on German officers planning troop movements, listening through doors and walls while artillery shells pounded the surrounding hills. Another team had to sabotage a bridge with minimal explosives, balancing the need for destruction with the risk of harming civilians nearby. The operation was compounded by near-constant aerial bombardment, shifting front lines, and the unpredictability of winter weather, which turned forests into frozen death traps. Remarkably, some operatives completed their objectives and returned to Allied lines with intelligence that helped prevent the Germans from exploiting a potential breakthrough, while others vanished entirely, swallowed by the forest or captured, never to be seen again. This last-minute, high-risk infiltration was a testament to the courage, ingenuity, and desperation of American soldiers operating behind enemy lines. And though it remains almost invisible in most historical accounts, it arguably played a crucial role in blunting the deadliest German offensive of the war. While much of the Pacific theater focused on large-scale naval battles and island-hopping campaigns, a secret American unit known as the Alamo Scouts carried out missions that few even knew existed, often operating completely alone behind Japanese lines. Formed under the command of General Walter Kruger in 1943, this elite reconnaissance team specialized in gathering intelligence, guiding guerrilla operations, and rescuing prisoners of war, all without the support of heavy weapons or conventional units. Their training was grueling. Scouts were taught jungle survival, hand-to-hand combat, silent movement, and advanced navigation techniques that required reading stars and natural terrain. Often in areas swarming with hostile forces, operating in small groups of 2 to 5, the Scouts infiltrated Japanese-held islands like Light, Mindoro, and Luzon, gathering critical intelligence on troop positions, fortifications, and supply lines, often under threat of immediate execution if discovered. One of their most famous operations was the rescue of prisoners at the Cabanatuan POW camp in the Philippines, where they guided rangers and guerrilla forces through dense jungle, bypassed enemy patrols, and coordinated a flawless extraction that saved hundreds of American and Filipino lives. The Alamo Scouts' missions were swift, precise, and often invisible to the broader military command, with reports filed under code names and their successes rarely publicized. Despite risking their lives repeatedly, the unit maintained a perfect record with virtually no casualties among its members, a feat unmatched in most special operations of the era. Their story, largely hidden for decades, demonstrates not only the courage of these unknown soldiers, but also how America's special forces evolved from desperate improvisation into an elite tool capable of striking deep into enemy territory with surgical precision, deep in the jungles and remote islands of the Pacific, far from the roaring battles of aircraft carriers and amphibious assaults. A network of Americans, known as the Coast Watchers, waged a silent, invisible war against the Japanese Empire, often living for months or even years in complete isolation. These operatives worked alongside Australian allies and sympathetic islanders, hiding in dense foliage and rocky outcroppings to observe enemy naval movements, troop deployments, and supply convoys. Their mission was simple in concept but nearly impossible in execution: relay intelligence back to Allied command to save lives and guide military operations, all while evading discovery by Japanese patrols who would not hesitate to execute them on the spot. Many of the Coast Watchers were ordinary men radio operators, missionaries, or soldiers transformed into elite reconnaissance agents by necessity, relying on ingenuity, survival skills, and courage. One American radioman famously refused evacuation, despite being injured, staying behind to ensure critical messages reached the U.S. Navy, ultimately saving hundreds of Marines during the Guadalcanal campaign. Their radios, often crude and powered by hand-cranked generators, became lifelines across hundreds of miles of ocean, transmitting intelligence that allowed Allied forces to ambush enemy ships, avoid traps, and coordinate landings with deadly precision. Despite their vital role, Coast Watchers remained largely unknown to the public, their heroism overshadowed by the larger, more visible battles of the Pacific. These silent saviors exemplified the extraordinary bravery and resourcefulness required to fight a war in the shadows, proving that sometimes the smallest actions behind enemy lines had the largest impact on the outcome of the war. Amid the chaos of the Pacific War, the U.S. military launched one of its strangest yet remarkably effective secret operations, Project Ivory Soap. Unlike traditional combat missions, this program sent specially trained engineers, mechanics, and pilots behind enemy lines to repair aircraft, maintain equipment, and keep the fighting machines of the Allies operational in the most remote and dangerous locations imaginable. These flying maintenance crews were stationed on floating repair platforms, disguised as ordinary ships, moving from island to island in the Pacific, often within sight of Japanese garrisons and naval patrols. They had to perform critical repairs on damaged planes immediately after battle, sometimes under fire, and occasionally while Japanese forces conducted counter-raids just miles away. The men of Project Ivory Soap were not soldiers in the conventional sense. They were innovators and problem solvers forced into life or death situations, often improvising repairs with limited tools, cannibalizing parts from wrecked aircraft, and constructing makeshift runways in dense jungle clearings or on coral atolls. Beyond their technical expertise, these engineers became scouts, couriers, and even combatants when necessary, sometimes engaging in sabotage missions or defending their isolated positions against enemy reconnaissance teams. Their work was essential to sustaining Allied air power in the Pacific, allowing fighter planes and bombers to return to battle almost immediately, keeping pressure on Japanese forces and saving countless lives. Yet despite the critical nature of Project Ivory Soap, it remained virtually invisible in post-war narratives, tucked away in classified reports and the memories of the men who quietly risked everything to keep the American war machine running behind enemy lines, high in the snow-covered Alps of Austria. An OSS mission codenamed Greenup became one of the most perilous undertakings of World War II, blending espionage, survival, and raw courage into a story that few have ever heard. The operation tasked a small team of American agents, including an Austrian-born operative fluent in German, to infiltrate deep into Nazi-controlled territory and gather intelligence on troop movements, supply depots, and potential collaborators within the regime. The terrain itself was a near-lethal obstacle: jagged peaks, freezing temperatures, and hidden cliffs made every step a gamble, while German patrols scoured the valleys below for intruders. To reach their objectives, the team had to traverse snowfields at night, navigate by starlight, and blend into remote villages where even a single mispronounced word could reveal them as outsiders. They established covert observation posts on ridges, signaling Allied command with primitive radio devices hidden in rock crevices, all while evading detection by the Gestapo and local informants loyal to the Nazi Party. The intelligence they collected proved invaluable, revealing troop reinforcements and supply movements that allowed Allied units to plan precise strikes and avoid ambushes in Austria. But the danger was constant. One misstep could have meant execution in freezing mountain conditions, far from any help. Remarkably, despite the extreme hazards, the team successfully completed its mission and exfiltrated undetected, a feat so astonishing that even their commanding officers initially doubted it had been possible. Operation Greenup remained classified for decades, a hidden triumph of American ingenuity and courage, and a stark reminder of the deadly, invisible war fought in the shadows of Europe's most forbidding landscapes. In the closing months of World War II, as the Third Reich began to crumble under relentless Allied pressure, a daring and almost unbelievable OSS mission took shape. A secret American flight into the heart of Nazi Germany to attempt contact with anti-Hitler German officers who were rumored to be seeking a way to end the war. The operation was shrouded in secrecy, planned with meticulous precision to avoid detection by both German loyalists and Allied intelligence that feared leaks could compromise the mission. A small team of American intelligence officers, disguised in civilian attire, flew under the cover of darkness, landing at clandestine airstrips in rural Germany far from bombed-out cities. They traveled to safe houses scattered across the countryside, often navigating through areas swarming with German patrols and checkpoints, relying on coded messages and local sympathizers to move. Undetected, the stakes were nearly unimaginable. If captured, they would have been executed as spies, and the fragile German officers they sought to negotiate with risked immediate execution themselves. During tense meetings in rustic farmhouses and hidden rooms, the Americans attempted to gauge the willingness of these officers to stage a coup, or negotiate surrender, recording every detail to relay to Allied command. The mission, ultimately, did not achieve its full objective, as internal German divisions and mistrust among conspirators complicated negotiations. Yet the intelligence gathered provided crucial insight into the fracturing Nazi hierarchy. For decades, the existence of this flight and the Americans who risked their lives in it remained classified, overshadowed by larger battles and post-war politics. Yet it stands as a testament to the audacity, diplomacy, and courage of the operatives who entered the lion's den of Hitler's crumbling empire. As the Allies advanced across Europe in 1944 and 1945, one of the most critical secret missions was the ULSO's mission, a covert operation designed to track down Nazi nuclear scientists, capture experimental technology, and prevent Germany from developing atomic weapons. Led by American intelligence officers and military scientists, the ULSO's teams moved quickly behind advancing fronts, often parachuting into recently liberated or still contested towns, racing against time to secure laboratories, research papers, and key personnel before they could be destroyed or escape. The stakes were astronomical. If German scientists succeeded in creating a functional bomb first, the entire course of the war and world history could have changed dramatically. The mission required not only courage but precision. Operatives infiltrated university laboratories, industrial plants, and even private estates, navigating booby traps, armed guards, and sometimes suspicious local populations. In one remarkable instance, American officers located Werner Heisenberg's laboratory, capturing vital materials and forcing scientists to surrender critical information about the German nuclear program, effectively neutralizing the threat. Alongside gathering intelligence, ULSO's operatives also rescued physicists and technicians coerced into working for the Nazis, many of whom later contributed to Allied nuclear research. Despite the monumental importance of these operations, the ULSO's mission remained largely hidden in public memory, its successes quietly influencing the post-war balance of power. This mission showcased how intelligence, science, and daring field operations converged to prevent a nuclear catastrophe, and highlighted the extraordinary bravery of Americans operating in enemy territory, often in full view of danger but shrouded from history's spotlight. Despite their enormous impact on the outcome of World War II, the secret missions carried out by American operatives behind enemy lines largely vanished from public memory, buried under layers of classification, lost documents, and decades of post-war bureaucracy. Many of the men and women who participated were sworn to lifetime secrecy, forbidden even to speak to family or friends about the missions that had defined their lives, leaving personal accounts scarce and fragmented. Classified files were locked away in government vaults for decades, and in many cases, records were deliberately destroyed to protect identities and ongoing intelligence programs, erasing entire chapters of history from official narratives. The daring operations of OSS agents, Jedburgh teams, Alamo scouts, Coast Watchers, and the engineers of Project Ivory Soap were overshadowed by larger, more visible battles, leaving their stories almost invisible to the public eye. Yet through Declassified documents, recovered diaries, eyewitness interviews, and the painstaking work of modern historians, these missions have slowly emerged from the shadows, revealing acts of courage, ingenuity, and selflessness that helped shape the course of the war. They remind us that history is not just written in the headlines of major battles or the names of generals, but in the silent, unseen deeds of those who risked everything in the shadows. The forgotten heroes of these secret missions were the ones who bridged intelligence and action, survival and strategy, and ultimately, courage and history itself. Their legacy endures not only in the success of Allied operations, but as a testament to the extraordinary lengths Americans went to fight tyranny, proving that some of the most important battles of World War II were fought far from the cameras, far from recognition, and yet were absolutely crucial to the victory we celebrate today.